everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. I heard some shocking tales this morning of money laundering, of espionage, of organized crime and illegal organizations, all these unfounded allegations for human rights defenders who are carrying out their work in accordance with the UN Declaration of Human Rights Defenders and are being criminalized for international solidarity and humanitarian action. The situation of human rights defenders working on refugees and migrants is a priority for me. I'm very interested. I promise you I will follow this area and hope to, over time, be able to do something useful to help you. The mandate is limited in what it can do. I can only concentrate on the situation of human rights defenders. So, you know, the plight of refugees and migrants is outside my mandate. So please stick to your own experiences. But I can raise formal letters with the government setting out allegations and asking them to respond within 60 days. They have to respond to whatever I say. I take a very people-centered approach to the mandate. I want to take up cases. If we can't do them through the formal procedure because of lack of capacity, we can always tweet about cases and put them on our website and find a way to publicize the legitimate work that you all do that should be properly recognized. So I'll hand over now and just listen.
Thanks very much, Mary. So I'm going to call on our first speaker today is Mr. Dimitris Julius. So Dimitris, I see you there. If you could open your mic, you have 6 minutes and the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I saw the previous meeting too. I attended and I heard also stories that frightens me. People here knows me for being very aggressive against them. So let me first tell you that I live in Samos. I'm a lawyer in Samos and I grew up there. For the last 2 years, I'm part of a project for defending human rights, the Human Rights Legal Project in Samos, and through which we try to defend as much as we can the rights of refugees and asylum seekers. The last year, we mainly focus on the pushbacks, mainly because it's an everyday phenomenon in Samos. It's fierce, it's violent, and the way it's happening, it's making people's lives, putting people's lives in danger. Both Panagiotis Dimitras, that it's here and spoke before, and Tommy Olsen had a very aggressive behavior from me to them, because we are in constant fear, and I hope that they understand how fearful it is to be in the borders, try to do things that are being attacked by the Greek authorities. I myself was found one day, I saw my picture in a pro-governmental newspaper saying that this is a traitor, and from ministry sources, this is how this smuggling operation is working. And it was a photo of me speaking with Tommy Olsen, trying to find proof about pushbacks. So they will criminalize everything. It wasn't a secret, it was part of a documentary, but it was while it was spread by governmental sources to smear me, and of course to make my work even more difficult. Of course, my life in Samos has changed the last year. I feel attacked from authorities almost every day, me and my team. And the worst part is that we cannot operate as we should. Right now, as we speak, there is an arrival in Samos. There is a missing woman. We have notified the authorities, but we cannot go there because we know that we will be criminalized. On the weekend that passed 4 days ago, 10 people arrived in Seitani beach, a beach in Samos, very remotely. We knew about that and we couldn't go there because we knew that we will be arrested. There is no road to go there. You have to hike or take a boat. So we will be arrested. So instead of helping people, of doing what we have to do, we stayed in our houses to feel safe. Those people, of course, this arrival, of course, never announced, and those people were sent back to Turkey. 2 weeks ago, again, through Mr. Dimitras that it's here, we learned about an arrival in the same place. There was an amputee there, a guy with only one leg. Still, we couldn't go, of course. Still, we failed to do what we are supposed to do because we are really terrified. The same day, of course, we went to another arrival and we found 4 out of, I don't know how many arrived. We managed to find them, register them in the RIC, and they told us about families with newborns and a woman pregnant. When we asked about it, no one knew anything. And later we found out that they were sent back in Turkey, the pregnant woman miscarried. And this is because of us. It's our fault that we couldn't intervene better. And we couldn't intervene better because right now in Samos, in a town of 5,000 citizens, we have 1,000 police officers, secret police officers, port police officers, everything. We cannot do what we are supposed to do. So we urgently need an intervention so that we can feel safe to do our work. Right now, the feeling that I have for the last 3 months, at least, maybe more, but the 3 months, I'm talking about 3 months because we know that there are arrivals on the land, not on the sea. They succeed to arrive on the land, and they are being robbed by military, paramilitary, port police, we don't know exactly. They are being hit. Women are violated. They take all their money, they hit them, and they send them back. Sometimes they throw them in the sea, not even in a life raft. And in all this, we cannot intervene because every move we will do can be criminalized. Even me speaking with other human rights defenders can be criminalized. We saw the files that were referred before because I'm also a lawyer for some NGOs that have been criminalized. And I saw the files and really there are no evidence. This is the encrypted things they say. It's if you talk to WhatsApp with someone, that means that you are a criminal organization. So you cannot even speak with someone. Right now, we're not living in a state of law. We are living in a state of terror. If you are in Samos, Chios, Kos, Leros, and Lesbos, so the external European borders, there is no rule of law there. There is only a rule of police. I have friends that because they were photographing, they were taking photographs from the boats, they were called spies and brought into justice and waiting for their courts. The way that we avoiding it, me personally, is by sometimes don't do right what I have to do. Also because I'm a lawyer and I'm a Samian, they don't attack me directly, but through press and of course through gossip that goes up to my family, my mother, my father. They listen all the time. Your son will have a trouble. We tell you to protect him, tell him to stop, tell him not to make questions. So this is what we deal in Samos. And through this, I want you to do whatever you can so we won't be attacked by doing what the law says to protect the most vulnerable, and also to say sorry to both Panayote and Tommy for me cutting all our conversations. But this is what I'm afraid, that they will say something to me and then I will find myself also in a file like everyone else, and then I cannot even do these small things that I try to do right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dimitris. So at the end of all the interventions, Mary and and Brian will be responding to the things you've said. So we're going to hold off, like during the first session, for comments and questions until then. So now I'm going to call on our next speaker, who's Sabine Eschete. I hope I pronounced it right. Please go ahead and take the floor.
Hi, thank you, Michael. And also I would like to thank the Office of the Special Rapporteur and everyone else who made today's hearing possible. I am Sabine Eschete and I will speak on behalf of Human Rights 360. Also present today is my colleague, Evgenia Kouniaki. Human Rights 360 is a Greek organization founded in 2017. We focus on the support of the rights of vulnerable populations, such as migrant refugees and the homeless. Our main actions include social integration services and legal support to vulnerable people, border monitoring at the land border of Evros, advocacy, litigation, strategic communication, as well as re-granting. The criminalization of the actions of NGOs, of course, concerns us, and we support the testimonies from the other organizations. And we do as well understand that the organizations operating in the Aegean Islands are more vulnerable to criminal prosecution, as they have reported several times the ongoing pushbacks by the Coast Guard. At Evros region, at the Greek-Turkish borders, as Human Rights 360, we have not faced until now a criminal offense or a threat of a criminal offense, as we monitor human rights violations mostly through testimonies of pushbacks, victims and missions. Access to the crossing points where pushbacks are systematically happening is not possible due to the fact that the territory is a militarized zone. In case someone enters without permission, they will be arrested, as it has happened in cases of journalists, with the latest arrest being that of a journalist from Sunday Times. However, given the fact that our team notifies the relevant authorities, the police department, the National Commission for Human Rights, and the Greek Ombudsman regarding possible victims of pushbacks, we do publish reports regarding violations of human rights, including said pushbacks, and we pursue robust advocacy and strategic litigation. It is not impossible that it would backfire at some point. In today's hearing, we would like to focus on the NGO registry that allows NGOs to operate on issues of migration and international protection in Greece. During our effort to enter the registry, we observed some practical issues that have implications regarding the operation of NGOs and freedom of association in Greece, even though as an organization we have now finally registered. As we do not want to repeat issues highlighted by our colleagues, we would like to quickly pinpoint some provisions of the joint Ministerial Decision 1061-6, which we think that especially affects smaller or grassroots non-governmental organizations. Generally, the long bureaucracy requires resources in personnel and funding, but also some technical expertise, and thus it deters small organizations from operating in Greece. Most of the procedures have limited deadlines, which, if they are not met, the NGOs face the risk of erasure from the registry. We do not oppose a certain level of financial scrutiny, and to this end, the authorities could require NGOs to provide simple financial statements. However, according to the Article 5 of the JMT, the registration prerequisites require financial audits completed by independent chartered accountants. Another mandatory requirement is that of an ISO certification regarding quality management. As it can be easily understood, both these requirements are time-consuming and have financial implications, as they require periodic updates and overall cost a few €1,000, and thus they exclude organizations with no management capacity and overhead funding. Also, the provision of Article 2 prohibit members of the administration from being enumerated and exclude small organizations that occasionally have, perhaps even at the level of cash flows, a greater share of state subsidy. This provision assumes that NGO members have access to other sources of income, and subsequently, again, directly affects small and community-led organizations from operating. Also, I would like to share two more points that affect more organizations. Evidently, there is an issue with the protection of employees' personal data. More specifically, in Article 11 of the JMT, the general prerequisite of a clean criminal record from NGO employees stigmatizes people that have been to prison and discourages their integration to employment. And finally, the discretionary power given to the authorities regarding the registration of an NGO is also an important issue. Specifically, according to the Article 12, the legislation allows the relevant authority, the Special Secretary for Coordination of Stakeholders, to decide whether an organization is efficient and beneficial with additional and unclear criteria pertaining to the activities of the applicant organization. As it can be understood, this vagueness can potentially be a way to censor civil society, as the criteria, if not specified, could be used arbitrarily. I hope that this has been helpful, and I'm looking forward for the following discussion. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sabine. So I'm going to invite the next speaker, who's Miss Natalie Gruber, to take the mic. Natalie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Eva, for organizing this meeting. And thank you very much, Mary, for all your great work and for this opportunity to speak about the situation of human rights defenders. It's greatly appreciated. I'm here as the co-founder of CHOSUR, which is a small organization registered in Austria, where I'm from, and which has been mentioned several times in the first session. Since March 2020, we've been working in Turkey and among other things, monitoring the situation on the EU's external borders from the Turkish side. There we also support survivors of illegal pushbacks with short-term accommodation, with food and with other NFIs, and we organize medical care wherever necessary. In addition to this work, we also monitor border violence by collecting testimonies of the systematic and illegal pushbacks from Greece and Bulgaria to Turkey. We do that as an active partner of the Border Violence Monitoring Network, and we publish all these testimonies in an open source database on the BVMN website. We also, with these testimonies and our experience, contribute to media reports about pushbacks and other fundamental rights violations at the EU's borders. And this is both on the land border in the Evros region and on the sea. And these media reports quickly drew the attention of the Greek media to CHOSUR and our work last year. Within less than a month after we started our monitoring work in Turkey, first reports about CHOSUR as a Turkish smuggling organization made headlines in the Greek media. Several months later, with the September press release by the Greek police that Marie and Isa from Mare Liberum have mentioned already, we learned that at the same time, namely 1 month after we started monitoring pushbacks, the Greek authorities started investigations against our organization. And as in all the previously mentioned cases, shortly after this first press release, several documents were leaked from the Greek police to the Greek media, through which we got informed that the authorities on Lesbos are trying to build a criminal case against CHOSUR on the charges of espionage, violation of state secrets, facilitation of illegal entry, and forming a criminal organization together with the other accused organizations. By the way, we have never operated on Lesbos or in Greece, and I personally have never set foot on the island. Like the other defendants, we have not received any official communication from the Greek authorities yet, but we have only learned about the details of the case through the media. Nevertheless, high government officials have made several statements condemning us without trial, and in these statements have identified me personally, and thereby gravely violating the presumption of innocence and further contributing to the dangerous environment for civil society engaging in solidarity with people on the move in this rapidly shrinking space. While systematically violating national, EU, and international law in their conduct on a daily basis, the Greek authorities are also abusing the law to persecute human rights defenders that are monitoring and reporting about these crimes of the Greek authorities, even when, as in our case, they've never been operating in Greece. In July this year, the authorities made another statement on a second case, and through our lawyer, we soon found out that CHOSUR is implicated in the second case as well. In this new case, authorities are alleging that CHOSUR is paying money to migrants to give false testimony of human rights violations at the hands of the Greek authorities, which is threatening the discreditation and defamation of the work of not just CHOSUR, but also the whole border violence monitoring network, and thus putting the year-long monitoring and advocacy efforts of 15 civil society organizations across the whole so-called Balkan route in danger. My friend Hope will be speaking about this right after me also. And although, all of those people criminalized in our case are citizens defending the basic human rights of every single individual, regardless of nationality, background, or legal status. And despite the wealth of evidence documenting the brutal reality on the Greek borders, the authorities have been refusing to investigate or act on it. They keep denying all the proof. Of course, they deny it. They are perpetrators. They are breaking the law. They are systematically violating human rights, the right to asylum, the Torture Convention, and much more. And their defense is attack. So simply for still upholding fundamental rights for everyone as enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, large parts of European society and our own governments are trying to paint us simultaneously as naive dreamers unaware of reality, while also discrediting and defaming us as criminal networks, spies, and terrorists. If trying to hold EU states accountable to international law is naive, then we are guilty of that charge, but the ludicrous charges of espionage, violation of state secrets, forming a criminal organization, and facilitating illegal entry bear any and all basis and present nothing but another episode in the never-ending series of European states criminalizing all those exposing the ugly truth of the European border regime and Greece at its forefront. We all have been aware of the troubling possibility of facing criminalization when we started working in this field. We did it anyways, because naive or not, we are united by our conviction that the more difficult the circumstances for human rights defenders become, the more important it is for citizens like us to defend the ideals enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the fundamental freedoms awarded to every single individual by the international community. When we started working on exposing these systematic violations, we expected to get in trouble, but we did not expect it to happen this quickly. We tried to prepare as best as we could, following the strategy of only exposing one person at a time publicly connected to our work, which in this case is me. But no matter how well we prepare, we can never avoid the impact that the criminal case has on our daily work. The intentions of the Greek authorities were mentioned by others previously, and they are clear. It's discrediting all the reports about fundamental rights violations. It's defaming our work, intimidating us, and deterring others from engaging in similar work. And unfortunately, they are quite successful in reaching those goals. As a small volunteer-based organization, we now have to spend a big part of our resources, that is time, energy, and effort, into preparing our defense. In addition, we are struggling even more than previously to receive funding for our work, as many funds refuse to support organizations under investigation. And we will have to deal with this for years to come, because as others mentioned, the authorities are dragging out the cases over years and years. Worst of all is the psychological impact it has on many of the accused people. Some have developed depression and OCD, others are struggling with anxiety. All of us are living in fear that whoever we work with or even are privately in touch with could be dragged into this case as well, or in other cases. And in my case, it happened twice already with cases discussed today. Nevertheless, we will continue fighting for human rights, both those of the people we support and our own, as long as possible. For how long we can continue, nobody knows. And in this struggle, we need all the support we can get, and we are therefore asking the Special Rapporteur to write a formal communication to Greece about the treatment of the human rights defenders, as was all discussed today. We would ask to give the Greek situation a priority in the annual report to Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. And we would urge you to strive to undertake a fact-finding country visit to examine the situation of human rights defenders and the right to defend rights in Greece as soon as possible. I think this has not been mentioned yet. We would also ask for you to meet with the Greek ambassador in Geneva to discuss the criminalization of human rights defenders as soon as possible. Thank you very much for all your time and all your efforts.
Thanks very much, Natalie. So I'm going to call on the next speaker now, who is Hope Barker from the Border Violence Monitoring Network. Hope, would you like to go ahead?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot, Michael and Eva, for organising this meeting. Thanks to all my colleagues who have spoken before me and will continue to talk. And thank you very much, Mary, for all you are doing already to support human rights defenders, and even more so for the opportunity to speak today about the state of play in Greece for those of us on the ground at the moment. So I'm here today representing the Border Violence Monitoring Network, which is a horizontal self-organized network denouncing pushbacks, other human rights violations, and broader forms of violence against people on the move at and within Europe's borders. We act in solidarity with those affected, irrespective of status, and are built on anti-fascist and anti-racist values to challenge existing border regimes and propose viable alternatives. We are monitoring and documenting the situation on the ground by recentering lived experiences and collecting evidence to hold perpetrators and facilitators accountable. BVMN started in northern Serbia by mid-2017, when activists from different projects that were documenting violent collective expulsions near Šid and Subotica decided to merge their reporting frameworks. Today, the network works in 6 different countries using a standardized reporting methodology to collect data on pushbacks. So BVMN is a network that stretches across Europe, and I'm definitely glad to see a number of our partner organizations from Greece present in this call today and given the opportunity to speak. I myself have been working on the ground in Greece with grassroots organizations since 2018 and have seen the increasing criminalization of our work firsthand. Since the election of the right-wing government in 2019, the situation for people on the move and those supporting them have gone from bad to worse. Some of my more experienced colleagues have talked and will talk about the difficulties for those organizations working in search and rescue. For us in the northern Greek mainland, what we have been faced with is an ever-growing police presence that hinders our possibility to work. This was particularly ramped up during the COVID-19 pandemic, when COVID laws were used to repeatedly interrupt our distributions, check papers, attempt to shut down our direct aid provision, and generally harass team members. We had officers visiting our distributions, which distribute basic items like hot meals, hygiene items, and clothing on almost a daily basis, trying to make our operations far more difficult to carry out. This practice culminated in a raid on our food distribution in July 2020. In this incident, several police officers, vans, cars, and motorbikes approached our distribution from multiple different sides and arrested 40 people. Despite us being told multiple times that these people would be processed in police stations, they reached out to us the next day from Turkey. So the situation culminated to the fact that people were apprehended whilst accessing direct aid and were pushed back to Turkey. Those of us who are long-term here on the ground have to think very carefully about who we speak to, what messages we send, who we're hanging out with, and even who can sit in our cars. It's gotten to the extent that a few months ago, we had a 16-year-old with a medical emergency at our distribution and were unable to escort him to the hospital in our vehicle for fear of being accused of smuggling, as the patient was undocumented. When these situations arise and we call an ambulance, they are always accompanied by police when we reveal the location, as we're in a well-known food distribution spot. If the police come, this poses a risk of detention or violent pushbacks to other undocumented service users at our distribution. This is then a call that we have to make, who to prioritize and how to get somebody in need basic medical assistance without putting volunteers, team members, and service users at risk. I've personally watched friends and valued colleagues doing the same work as me be targeted in relentless criminalization campaigns that put themselves, their work, and the invaluable help they provide to people on the move at risk. If this line continues, it is only a matter of time until it is all of us. An essential direct aid to a vulnerable population becomes practically unviable. This is not just a problem in Greece. Nearly half of all BVMN partners across Europe have been subject to criminalization procedures, be they private surveillance, court cases, or media smear campaigns. All of those affected are people defending the basic human rights of every individual, regardless of their nationality, background, or legal status. We will continue the fight to defend these rights. It seems at an increasingly high cost to ourselves and those we seek to support. We at BVMN therefore make these recommendations. We would welcome the special rapporteur to make a fact-finding mission to Greece, in which he would have the opportunity to speak in more depth with actors on the ground and see the situation firsthand. We would also call on the special rapporteur to meet with the Greek ambassador in Geneva to discuss the criminalization of human rights defenders in Greece. And we ask for a formal communication that acknowledges the situation for actors on the ground in Greece and calls for change. Thank you very much for listening today.
Thanks a million, Hope. So as I said earlier, Miriam Brown will be addressing the points you've raised at the end. And we've a few more speakers to hear from though before then. And I'd like to call on the next, which is Mr. Minos Mouzarakis. Minos, are you there? If you are, please turn on your microphone.
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thanks very much to all the organizer and of course to the special rapporteur for leading on this discussion. I work with Refugee Support Aegean, RSA, which is a legal organization offering legal support and representation to asylum seekers throughout different parts of the country. We're also one of the applicants before the highest court of the land, the Council of State, in judicial review proceedings against the joint ministerial decision setting up the NGO registry. So also look forward to discussing this in more detail if it's of interest. Since my previous speakers have discussed the registry and also its impact to quite some extent, I'd like to focus on 3 points in particular. One is the overall background to the legal framework relating to the activities of NGOs in the country, specifically with a focus on migration NGOs. And one element that is of note is that all 5 major reforms that have happened since 2020 to present have been passed without any form of public consultation. This includes 3 articles in legislative acts, namely Law 4662 of February 2020, Law 4686 of 2020, and the more recent development of September 2021 with Law 4825. And of course, we've also had 2 pieces of secondary legislation, the so-called JMDs, one adopted in March 2020, then replaced by the one that's currently in force of September. The reason why this is important and quite worrying for us is that, contrary then to consistent recommendations from not only UN bodies, but also Council of Europe bodies with specific recommendations on the Greek government to consult with the civil society sector prior to adopting or amending rules that affect its functioning. This is a point that is systematically disregarded by the government. There's also been public statements by the Ministry of Migration and Asylum in Parliament disregarding the authority of the Expert Council on NGO Law of the Council of Europe as a body that is civil society based and therefore not sufficiently authoritative to position itself on those matters. Second issue, very quickly touching upon some of the disproportionate requirements and legality issues of the legal framework itself, the JMD on the NGO registry. I'm very thankful to Sebene from Human Rights 360. I think she laid out very eloquently the overall sort of spectrum of different problems. One element that I'd like to highlight beyond the tight deadlines and the exorbitant costs, which we've also, of course, faced, even though from the administration's point of view, the process can be quite lengthy. To give you an illustration, we have completed our application under the current JMD in November 2020, after having already applied under the March 2020 framework, and we're still expecting a response on our application by the authorities. Now, one aspect that we've also raised among the different argumentation points in the Council of State proceedings relates to the type of data that are collected and violations of supranational norms, namely the EU General Data Protection Regulation. This is because the framework in force in Greece has no provisions that guarantee that people are informed and consent to the various categories of data that are processed by the authorities. The authorities that are to receive and process that data are not the competent ones, either on matters of labor law, social security, regulated professions, or even as far as criminal records are concerned. The Ministry of Migration is not the competent body for detection and prevention of crime. So we see very serious issues in data protection, which we have put forward before the court. A final point, without further ado, relates more to the overall chilling effect and intimidation that faces NGOs, but also legal practitioners. And again, sort of following on from my previous speakers. In our specific case, we have recently seen the impact of not being refused, because we're still waiting on the outcome of our application, but not yet being registered on the NGO registry. In recent communication with the camp on Lesbos, the Reception and Identification Center, after requesting a meeting with the director, our organization was denied a meeting on the basis that we were not registered on the registry, despite the fact that the application is still pending. At the same time, there have also been recent developments in practice in terms of how the authorities perceive lawyers' access to different facilities. So according to current policy for the RIC of Lesbos, lawyers need not necessarily ask for permission to get into the camp, but they need to inform camp management in advance. And this is something that is at odds with the well-established legal framework on the legal profession and provisions that regulate what access lawyers have to different facilities across the country. A final point that also relates to the work of lawyers and how this is curtailed by the government at the moment is the overall hostility and intimidation climate, especially in border areas. So there is, of course, increasing difficulty for lawyers to get into contact with people or even to provide support to people who are not, or at least not yet, officially registered and hold documentation by the authorities. In addition to the question of pushbacks that's been, I think, discussed at length, I would also highlight what has been happening in so-called quarantine facilities operated by the authorities on the islands. One sort of illustrative example is the site of Megala Therma on Lesbos, where, especially throughout the spring, new arrivals stayed for very prolonged periods without any registration, and any attempts to get early legal assistance were met with considerable resistance from the authorities. I would leave it at that, but look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Minos. So next, I'm going to call on Ellie Kriona. Ellie, if you would like to take the floor.
Yes, hi, my name is Elkrina Saranti. I'm the managing attorney of HIAS Greece. I'm based on the island of Lesbos, where I have been working since March 2017. HIAS is an international non-profit organization providing vital services across the world. And here in Greece in particular, we provide free legal aid to asylum seekers and refugees. On the island of Lesbos, where our main office is situated. And at the same time, we have also been involved in litigation and advocacy on matters of crackdown and criminalization of solidarity. Just like RSA that Minos is representing here, we are also one of the litigators and have also filed an annulment application against the joint ministerial decision on the NGO registries, because it's a registry for NGOs and for the members of the NGOs, together with Equal Rights Beyond Borders that are our partners and are also here today. Also, just like RSA, we have been waiting for the approval of our application for inclusion in the registry for over 1.5 years now, because we tried with the previous registry as well, and then we had a new joint ministerial decision, and still we haven't received a reply. And for this reason, we have been facing exactly the same issues of access that Minos just mentioned. Now, what I would like to also say is that based on our experience working on the island of Lesbos, what we have been seeing is changing the narrative, a very hostile narrative against migration-related NGOs as of the beginning of 2020, with actually governmental representatives and media openly accusing NGOs for smuggling, but also for instigating refugee protests that took place in Lesbos, and more recently for actually instigating and preparing even the fire at the Moria camp. At the same time, what we also saw again since the beginning of 2020 was a systematic practice of what we'd call apprehension. It's not exactly arrest, of human rights defenders usually joining migrants in the protests and placement in custody, actually arbitrarily, under the pretext of identity checks, although they were carrying their identification documents with them. At the same time, these persons have been requested to fill in a questionnaire called Questionnaire of Apprehended NGOs, and which is a very obviously unofficial document. And what has been particularly worrisome is that in a recent complaint to the Greek Ombudsman about the use of this document, where we also attached photos of this document, and I'm sure there are people here that had to fill it in, and I know who they were, the authorities denied its existence. They said it's the first time we see this document, we have never used it, which is a different element also, which is very preoccupying. Regarding the so after this whole climate of targeting and hostility towards the NGOs, especially in Lesbos, especially since the beginning of 2020, we also had a series of attacks, physical attacks, against NGOs and human rights defenders on the island. We have submitted information to your mandate, actually. We submitted information in March 2020 about this. And what I find also very interesting in the answer of the government to the joint communication of the special procedures was a repeated statement that no criminal complaints were filed about these attacks. Although a lot of these attacks were very well documented on the media with online videos where you could even clearly see the faces of the persons, and although due to their severity, a lot of them could have been actually investigated and prosecuted proprio motu. Also to say that, in fact, this is telling of the mistrust of the human rights defenders towards the Greek authorities, that they don't see us capable or willing to ensure their protection. I would say rather unwilling to ensure their protection. It's not so much a matter of being able or not, which could be attributed on the one hand on the generalized narrative, and on the other hand on what has been reported as complete inaction and non-intervention of of police officers who were present at the moment on the site of the attacks. Also in a case that we have been representing of an attack against a German journalist on an island, on the port, on the Thermi port at the Thermi port in Lesbos on the 1st of March 2020, still there have been no charges pressed, although the perpetrators are clearly identifiable on the videos that have been uploaded by the media. So we also see that even in the few cases where criminal complaints were filed, the investigations of the cases have been proceeding with extreme delays. Also, what is very worrisome as well is that there has been no public condemnation of these attacks against human rights defenders that at least would have meant something, even symbolically. There has been no public condemnation of the attacks, where at the same time, and in stark contrast, every time there is an investigation or prosecution of NGOs, this is accompanied by triumphal press releases, press conferences, and actually the leakage of personal data of the persons involved in contravention of the principle of secrecy of the pre-trial proceedings, and of course of the principle of presumption of innocence. Now, moving to the issue of the NGO registry, of course, we agree with everything that was mentioned already about the requirements and also about the legal, legal proceedings that led to this, to the adoption of this framework and the absolute lack of consultation. But we would also like to add that it is not only a matter of burdensome requirements, but it's also the whole architecture of the joint ministerial decision that builds, that brings NGOs under strict state control and direction, and also creates a chilling effect. Just to explain, just to mention here that even if an NGO is actually registered, then they can be removed from the registry, or the natural members as well can be removed from the registry of natural persons, if it is considered that they are involved in an illegal act, as evidenced by a document of a competent public authority. There is absolutely no explanation and no clarification as to what this means. In stark, obviously, contravention of the principle presumption of innocence, and with no due process and fair trial rights being respected. At the same time, it is foreseen that the NGOs and their natural persons can be removed from the registry if the authorities consider that the performance of the implementation of their projects is poor. No criteria. There is no criteria, no methodology as to how they could actually, their projects will be assessed. And again, that goes against the principle of freedom of association. Then finally, another example is that a member of an NGO can be removed from the registry for as little as not informing the authorities within 24 hours of any change in their personal data. And once the person is removed, then he or she can no longer work ever in any other migration-related NGO, and the NGO that this person has been working for is also removed from the registry. So these are clearly disproportionate provisions, and really my emphasis here is that one thing is the requirements, when we feel that there has been some focus by international institutions on the requirements of the registration, But for us, it goes much farther. Even if you do make it to the registry, you do have to actually self-censor to make sure that you will not be removed from the registry. What we have also been seeing is that the answer of the authorities when they're confronted about the measures, about the joint ministerial decision, is usually trying to downplay the impact on the NGO. So publicly, it is mentioned there is no impact to international institutions. Even if they don't make it to the registry, there is no impact. Whereas at the same time, internally, we receive completely different communication. And as Minos already explained, being blocked, being barred from access to the sites, as Isa explained before, the whole issue about search and rescue, NGOs, etc. And finally, and I was thinking about this just hearing all the other participants, what we have also been seeing as lawyers is, and understand this might be a little meta and not so serious as everything else discussed here, but it is telling of the climate. We even see this hostile narrative spilling over even on the legal briefs submitted by the authorities in litigation that we have ongoing both at the European Court of Human Rights or internally. There is very often attack against the people defending the cases. Like the lawyer of this case might have their own purposes. They work in NGOs and they might have their own purposes for bringing this case. Or for instance, in the litigation we have now against the state, it's at some moments mentioned something like, it's exactly the NGOs that are bringing this litigation but don't want any regulation because they want to do what they want in the country. So it's also very problematic for our legal culture, this change of paradigm. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Eli. So we're going to go to the next speaker now, who's Mr. Vasilis Papastergiou. Vasilis, if you'd like to take the floor, you have 6 minutes.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'll take the speech on behalf of the Greek Council for Refugees, one of the older NGOs in Greece. We're not really, let's say, victims of criminalization as an organization for ourselves, but we really are aware about what about the incidents of the other organizations of our colleagues. And the first thing I have colleagues, we know that their trouble in the field are considered to be our trouble as well. We know that the work that they're doing, and we really know that what they denounce about the problem they have about in the context of criminalization, I think they're true denouncements. I mean, they have a real trouble about that. So we really trust our colleagues and we trust what they're saying. Second thing, I think I'll just bring an example about the way that the government handles these situations about NGOs, which I think is very characteristic. I think you're aware already about this incident because I haven't attended the first round, but I think it's really very clear about the way that police and government face the actions of human rights defenders. As you know, last December 20, 2020, there was an announcement by the police that 33 members of NGOs in Lesbos were in a network, let's say, of illegal actions concerning smuggling and the trafficking of refugees and migrants. There was an announcement that there were even newspapers or media that were talking about arrestments. And of course, the source of this information may be the police. But still, there was no inquiry. Nobody of the persons that were considered to be accused were called to give, were examined by the by the prosecutors. So the question is, how can we characterize an announcement by the police where the people that were considered to be accused for these accusations were not even called by the police or by the judiciary to be examined? The question is, what did the ministry do in this situation? The Minister of Ministry and Asylum had a statement. The statement said, congratulations to the police. I mean, and she said that we will not tolerate NGOs with illegal actions in the field. So this is clearly a breach of the presumption of innocence by a member of the government. And the sub-minister, let's say the vice minister, Mr. Economou, said that this announcement is of major importance. So what we see is that we really have a kind of media policy about this issue, while there is no judicial, even a judicial procedure about this accusation, the government, the police already had to poison, let's say, the atmosphere, trying to show that there were really real findings and that the people were supposed to be guilty before not even a trial, but before even the inquiry. I consider this example as very characteristic because I think it shows how you can really poison the whole atmosphere, the whole background in which the human rights defenders are trying to help and they're trying to act. So I would say that the model that we face is not really one of a direct attack, while direct attacks somehow happen sometimes, but to poison, let's say, the whole atmosphere, to make, to presume that human rights defenders are suspicious, let's say, persons. And that's why sometimes local attacks in local level are very possible to happen. I mean, what the examples and the incidents that my colleagues have referred before, I think they're all true, and I think they're the result of this procedure. I may not, I have to just to mention as well the recent developments in legislation. I mean, the Article 40 in the law concerning deportations and return bill. As you know, there has been a critique by the Commissioner of the Council of Europe, Mr. Mijatovic, about that, because I think this is a clear step towards criminalization. That means that no rescues may happen from NGOs unless they are subject to the orders of the police and the marine, let's say, services. That means that I think that this is a further step towards criminalization. That means that organizations that will try to organize rescues in the Aegean will be subject to this provision as well. And I think this is a clear problem because I think it is a total, let's say, undermining of human life, which would be should be the first principle in all time. I mean, rescues should be encouraged and not discouraged in any way. Finally, I think that the problem with the registry has been already said, it has been discussed. I think that the fact that a member of an NGO is supposed to be taken off the registry if he or she is with actions that are really irrelevant with the task as a member of NGO is totally another step to criminalization. Sorry. And it's clearly a case of putting obstacles to the task of the NGOs, and I think that we have to think it in the whole context of criminalization, as discussed before. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Vasilis. So our penultimate speaker is Mr. Asterios Kanavos. Asterios, if you'd like to go ahead and take the floor.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. I would like to thank you, Michael, Eva, and Mary for the invitation to this hearing and for your interest in the prevailing situation of human rights defenders in Greece.
No, I mean, it is negative.
Excuse me?
No, I think you can go ahead, Asterios.
Okay, I'm sorry. I would like to say that I'm really glad that there are many familiar faces participating to this hearing. This is extremely important in my opinion, since we have common experiences, we have faced common barriers and common problems imposed to our operations and to our daily work by the Greek government. My name is Kanavos Asterios. I'm a Greek lawyer and I'm currently working with Phoenix Humanitarian Legal Aid since February 2021 as a lawyer, and I'm the coordinator of the legal team, which is mostly based in Lesbos. I also used to live in, I'm actually now based in Athens, but I used to live in Lesbos in the past from August 2018 until December 2020. And as a result, I had the opportunity to actually experience several, let's say, historical moments that took place on Lesbos Island during this period of time. and to which I will briefly refer again later on to some of them. Phoenix provides pre-legal aid and counseling, protection services, and also psychosocial support to vulnerable asylum seekers and refugees in Lesbos. The intimidation and criminalization of human rights workers and NGOs personnel, of course, is not a new phenomenon in Greece, as we all know, and in Europe. However, the attempts to actually discourage or even prevent the operation of NGOs and human rights workers in Greece have been seriously intensified since the change of the Greek government 2 years ago, approximately. The current government follows and enforces a strict anti-migrant and anti-refugee policy, which can be depicted not only on the reformations that we talked before, all the fellow participants, on the Greek asylum legislation regarding asylum seekers, but also in the new joint ministerial decision, as amended also, creating the new registry of the NGOs of the ministry. Despite the fact that there was already a registry in force, and which has been heavily criticized for imposing disproportionate barriers on constitutional rights, such as the freedom of association, as previously mentioned. Since the previous participants have analyzed in a very detailed way the gaps and the problematic provisions of the relevant joint ministerial decision, and I will try not to be repetitive. I would like to focus on the obligation on a specific provision, two specific actually provisions, which impose the obligation to provide a copy of criminal record, both for the members of the NGO in order to be able to register and be certified, but also for the rest of the personnel cooperating, working for the NGO, which creates serious doubts regarding the protection of sensitive personal information. And also this requirement is disproportionate, since it almost includes all the criminal possible acts from the criminal code, for which the members should not have been convicted. I will also give another example, practical example, regarding the application of Phoenix for the registration and the certification, which is another very good example amongst others, of course, since, as already mentioned, other NGOs haven't received an answer yet, or haven't been registered, or have been rejected, regarding the restrictions that the Greek government wants to impose. And of course, another very important issue is the well known to all the Greek lawyers, the consecutive amendments of the legislation, which create insecurity and uncertainty. So Phoenix officially became a Greek NGO in December 2019. We started the registration process in September 2019. Repeatedly, we have been asked to submit additional documents, which we did in all of the times we have been asked to do. In the end, we received, our registration was finally rejected, since we could not provide as required the financial and tax documentation for 2 consecutive financial years, since we haven't been actually operating for 2 consecutive full years. In the end, some weeks later, there were some guidelines based on which NGOs that are operating less than 2 years could actually register. They could submit all the relevant documentation regarding the period they are operating without the requirement of 2 consecutive financial years. We did so. We submitted a new application, which is still pending, and for another time, we have been asked several times to submit several additional documents, which, as the previous participants mentioned, impose too many. Some of them is very difficult to acquire actually, and to be able to submit. Finally, I would like to speak a little bit about the intimidation and 2 different experiences related to this. The first one is, as Ellie also mentioned previously, the day of the 1st of March 2020, when a boat with asylum seekers arrived in Therma port in Lesbos, where me and another colleague from RSA, I was working then for RSA, we were attacked after the other attacks that took place on this day. Hopefully nothing really bad actually happened. We were orally attacked. There was an attempt to physically attack us, but it was, in the end, it didn't take place. However, of course, as you can understand, all the situation in Lesbos in this period was really stressful, and it is very difficult actually to be able to provide services and to work under these conditions. Lastly, I would like to mention another event that took place last week with Phoenix. I got a phone call by one of our team members informing me about a case of a man who would like to seek asylum, who was unregistered. He was claiming that he arrived 5 days ago in Lesbos and he hasn't been registered with the authorities. We followed all the legal procedures. We informed all the relevant and competent authorities, and we instructed the person to follow the necessary steps in order to submit asylum application. Later this day, we received the phone calls from the police of Mytilene asking questions about how this person arrived in Lesbos, how we knew that he arrived, where we found him, etc. This is another example of intimidation by the Greek authorities for NGOs working and actually trying to guarantee the right to asylum and to provide legal assistance to asylum seekers in Greece. Thank you all very much for today's very important hearing and discussion. And I would like to ask from the special rapporteur to try to monitor the alarming situation that exists in Greece right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Asterios. So we have one more speaker before Miri will say some brief remarks in response. So I'd like to ask Nikki Georgiou if you could open your mic now and take the floor.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the invitation, the organization, and of course the special reporter. My name is Nikki Georgiou. I am a Greek lawyer representing the organization of Rights Beyond Borders. Our organization is a Greek and German organization, being registered in Germany and Greece. In Greece, we were registered officially in 2009. We are an organization providing free legal aid through the whole asylum procedure, as well as doing a lot of education, especially for the European rights. And as my colleague mentioned, have also launched an anonymous application against them along the NGO industry. Regarding the criminalization part, we have not been directly criminalized, either of our colleagues. Just an incident that happened a while ago. One of the colleagues was included in a file on facilitation of legal stay of the minor, and she was invited to give a testimony on how she contacted the minor, how she got information of this minor, while she had already contacted all relevant authorities about the existence of the minor and the obligation for the relevant authorities to host and protect the minor. And she was found in the position of testifying on how exactly she met the minor and what exactly the actions she made on his behalf. So this is something pending. Of course, it created an additional psychological burden at the time. Regarding the NGO registry, I will talk a bit personal experience. We tried to register and we were rejected. We filed application November 2020 and we got the rejections 2 months after, January 2021. And the reasons of rejection were like very weird, because they actually say that we did not submit documents that we already submitted. Also, they were putting into question our efficiency without also like giving further like argumentation on what exactly they mean and how they think that our efficiency is not proven in order to reject us. And also another document, which was a formality, but it could be very easily solved. And yeah, and the base and like the main argument was that we had not at the time that we had not been operated for years. So yes, right now we are in the procedure of that we will apply again for the registry. Of course, this is a huge. Of course, it creates also financial burden for organizations, especially for smaller organizations. So somehow organize a fundraising campaign in order to be able to like gather all these financial means in order to get registered. Like as also my colleagues mentioned before about the audit reports, it's something that costs around €1,000. ISO is also something that costs a lot. So regarding the NGO registry and the fact that we are not registered yet, we have offices in Athens, Kos and Chios, and on Kos we have on Kos we have faced problems because of the fact that we are not registered yet. On an arrival that we have, on a new arrival on Kos that we cooperated with us, our legal coordinator was on the site in order to give legal assistance to the new arrivals on the campsite in the Reception Identification Center of Kos, and the head of the Reception Identification Center told him to leave the site and to not provide any kind of legal information or legal assistance to the people there, because as organization we were not registered yet. She was an international lawyer. She was an American lawyer. She was not a lawyer. I don't know if this played a role or not, but the main argument was that we cannot provide legal assistance because we're not registered. And on Chios, like in a similar case, we wanted to represent a minor, and the prosecutor for minors also did not give us access to the file and don't provide us with the necessary authorization because at the time our application was still pending. So these are, of course, incidents that make our work extremely difficult. And as you like already mentioned before, it's also the psychological burden and how careful you should be and how you should talk and be very careful about the content of the messages that you will send much for the invitation. And yes, for the rest, I'm completely in line with what the others already mentioned.
Thanks, Marian. So Mary, would you like to say a few words now?
I would. As I said after this morning's session, I've really learned an awful lot today about how you're being targeted. I mean, from the charges of espionage, money laundering, trafficking, smuggling, the lack of presumption of innocence and the right to a fair trial being, you know, the whole business of organized crime and illegal organizations. I mean, I found it very shocking in one of the testimonies I heard where the only evidence against somebody who was detained was that they'd given water to is really dreadful. And the behavior of the EU and in this instance, the Greek government is disgraceful. The issue of registration and the way it's being used against you. I'm very thankful to you for describing in such great detail how it, the process and how long it takes and how it seems to be never ending, and then the possibility of removal at any stage. The leaking of information to the media and the surveillance that has taken place in some cases, and the use of the media by the policymakers to smear and poison the atmosphere in which human rights defenders can do their work. And of course, disregarding in Parliament of institutions like the Council of Europe is ridiculous. However, that all being said, and then there was we heard the treatment of women, racial profiling and strip searching, invasive strip searching. I'm very conscious of what you've all asked me for, which is basically a fact-finding mission, documenting the situation, raising it with the permanent mission. That's no problem. That raising with the permanent mission is no problem. Brian will talk about the cases we've taken up already. But regarding what kind of documentation and fact-finding mission, I need to think about this, because as I said this morning, we need to find a way of trying to find the best vehicle, the most official vehicle for producing something, because producing reports by themselves they don't have any great standing as a special rapporteur. So we need to think about how best we can report and monitor and document over time, and advocate on changing the narrative, as you all well, as some of you mentioned, is so necessary, that human rights defenders are seen as legitimate, as carrying out their work in accordance with the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders and the other international standards, and they shouldn't be criminalized for that. All I can say to you is that it is a priority for me. As I said, I put in defenders working on refugee and migrant rights very quickly into my priorities when I started. And we will think about how best to try and become more active in following and in documenting with the aim of some sort of official document. But how we do that, we need to think about. I can't give you a straight answer now. And again, with fact finding, that would be an academic visit. It wouldn't have any status within the UN per se. And I really think that this issue, because Europe has become such a fortress, and the refugee and migrant crisis has been going on for so long, that it needs a serious response to what is happening. Because as I said this morning, trying to crush the spirit out of you all for your humanitarian action is not acceptable. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I have to go now.